Hello, everyone. My next guest doesn't really need an introduction. He's an hyper polyglot, speaks several language, is also the founder of LingQ, and is a very special guest for the Montreal Language Festival. So, welcome, Steve Kaufmann. So I know that for your own videos on your YouTube channels, you've often talked on how you begin learning about other languages, but just for our own sake, for the viewers who don't know about Steve Kaufmann, just
So, how do I start a language? Good question. And I have a very good example because I just started learning Greek.
right.
Okay? So, I started Greek about, I would say, 2.5 to 3 months ago. And so I did a number of things. I wanted to try different things. So, I tried Duolingo. I bought Living Language, both the book version, which was a mistake, and then I was able to buy it for much less money, online version, which is easier to navigate. And then I started doing the lessons at LingQ. Essentially, I abandoned the other two, and I can explain why I didn't find Duolingo very useful. What I want to do when I start a language is I simply want to expose myself to the language or expose the language to me. So I start out with simple content. And of course, I use LingQ, so I look up the words that I don't know. And the simple content is going to be 40 seconds long, less than a minute long. So then it's one page, it's like not that much content. So I save the words, then I review them. We have different, like closed tests, flashcards, fill in the blanks, multiple choice. And so I kind of massage these things, listen to them, read them, review the words, don't understand, listen, read, and slowly I start to make sense of what I'm listening to and reading. Then I find a grammar source on the web, typically, because there's lots in any language, whatever you want to look up. You want to look up Greek grammar, you want to look up Greek verbs, you want to look up Greek nouns. There's all kinds of stuff. So as I'm going through this language and the stuff is a bit strange to me, then I'll look up and I get some explanation, which typically I forget, but it helps you so that there's this, it's like a cycle. You're listening and reading. You have questions. You look things up related to the grammar. You go back to listening and reading. You don't fully understand. You review the words. And so you're just kind of working this material until your brain eventually starts to put some things together and you start to remember certain words. I mean, forgetting, I think Luca said the same. I mean, forgetting is the big tool we use. It's the forgetting and relearning and forgetting and relearning. And eventually things start to fall into place. So with Greek now, I've had 3 conversations online. I have listened. Oh, and of course the big thing is we started our mini stories project. So these are, we're going to have 100 stories. They're going to be, we have volunteers translating them into 30 languages. They follow this simple formula of a simple story. Leo got up in the morning, he made himself some coffee, he made himself a piece of toast, blah, blah, blah. It's a short story. Then Leo tells a story. I got up in the morning, I did this, I did that. And then there's a question. Did Leo sleep in? No, he didn't sleep in. He got up. And so the same vocabulary, more or less, is repeated 3 times in a simple story. Only the most common verbs. The key thing is, people say, I got to learn the most highest frequency words. Not necessarily, but verbs. If you can learn and get good at the most common verbs, a lot of the language is going to fall into place. So I have listened to them and read them 15, 20 times each. So I go around the house if I'm cleaning up or if I'm in the car, I'm just listening. So listen, read, review the words, and at some point start speaking. And have in the background access to a grammar resource. You're not going to try and remember it, and I never do grammar exercises, but just because you're going to have questions about the language. How does this language work?
How do you manage, say, your time between keeping up with the language that you're already pretty familiar with and learning a new language that you want, like Greek?
I think, if you learn languages, no matter if you're learning your first, new language or if you have 15, you have to be willing to deal with failure. Okay. You have to be willing to deal with uncertainty and failure. So if I haven't been at my Russian for a while, but have more recently been studying, say, other Slavic languages, and now Greek. When I start to speak Russian, I'm going to be confused.
Right.
And so people are like, you say you speak Russian, how come you're making all these mistakes? Or why are you confusing it with Polish? Doesn't matter to me. I 2 steps back in my Russian, but I acquired now Ukrainian, Polish, and Greek, some Greek. When I get back to my Russian, initially I'm going to be confused, but very quickly, it won't take very long. I'll be right back to where I was, and maybe even further along. So I never worry. Like some people worry, oh, if I go in, like I've been learning French, and now if I start learning Spanish, am I going to forget my French? There will be confusion. And when you go back to French, you might stumble a bit. But in the end, you'll be further ahead. Further ahead. So I never worry about it. It's just when you get better at a language when you use it. You can't start off, like I play old timers hockey. We don't go right into the game. We go and warm up a bit first. You can't just expect to right off the bat snare those. My top languages, I can snare them. Doesn't matter. You can come at me, whatever, in French, Japanese, whatever. I'll be okay. But in the languages where I'm not so strong, if I haven't used them for a while, I'll be rusty and I'll stumble.
And so, I guess the point is you never actually lose it permanently. Like if you start back on your Russian or some other language that you'd be more rusty, then it's not like you've learned it for nothing. In other words, you've invested some time, but it's all worth it in the end.
Absolutely. You don't lose it. And if you do, if you learn the way I do, which is lots of listening and reading. So I have socked that language into my brain. Like it's there. Lots of input. Hours and hours and hours of listening and reading. It's going to be there. So when you go back to listening and reading, even if you haven't yet spoken, then you're going to bring it back pretty quickly. In fact, my experience, and I've mentioned this on my YouTube channel, and other people have said they agree, you actually improve. That there's what I call this effect of benign neglect. If you leave it alone and you work on another language, you'll find that first language, once you get back to it, you'll be better than you ever were.
Right.
That's been my experience. So, not a problem.
In other words, it gets easier and easier as you go along.
It gets easier and easier as you go along, but I think learning other languages helps you in the languages you already know. That you are exercising your language brain in ways that benefit that initial language.
Tell us in a minute or two how you got interested in this whole languages business.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, so much is motivation. Motivation and confidence are so important. So we had French at school. I mean, growing up in Montreal, we had French at school from grade 2, and yet no one spoke French because in those days in Montreal, if you lived in the western part of Montreal, you just operated in English, and people in the other part of Montreal, they operated in French, and there was very little contact.
Right.
So we weren't very motivated. And then I got turned on to French. So once I was turned on, and of course I had it in school, there was lots there that I had simply not been very interested in. So then I got very keen, and I remember I was at McGill, so I'd go over to the University of Montreal and sit in on lectures, and I'd read Le Devoir, and I thought I was really cool and watch French movies and stuff. And then I ended up going to France for 3 years, right? So that was the first experience of actually converting. I became a person who was fluent in French. That's a significant. People have never done it. That experience of changing yourself into someone who's actually fluent in another language. So then I was accepted into the Canadian Diplomatic Service. I found out that they were planning to train someone to learn Chinese because Canada was about to recognize the People's Republic of China.
Right.
And volunteered. I said, you got to choose me. And in fact, I started taking Chinese lessons in Ottawa. I didn't learn anything, but I was able to go to the management of the Trade Commissioner Service and say, look, if you're going to send anyone, send me because I'm already interested. So they sent me. And I remember a friend of mine says, yeah, but Steve, but what if you go there and what if you can't learn Chinese? The thought never entered my mind. Once you have become fluent in another language, you can do it. And so then with Chinese, and then ultimately, and again, when we moved to Japan. And then, of course, when you get into the language, you got to get interested in the language. So when I was learning Chinese, I was totally into Chinese history, Chinese culture. When I lived in Japan, it was the same way. So it's kind of the language leads you to the culture, then the culture leads you further into the language, and so forth. And then I just decided I was interested in learning languages. So I mean, I had hitchhiked a lot in Spain, so I could kind of manage Spanish, but I started getting books. Like my library here is full of books in Spanish and German and other languages, and I was trying to read them and always having to look words up and always missing just enough of the, words that it was painful. So that's what led to the creation of LingQ.
So tell me a little bit more about LingQ. So you decided to start LingQ. I guess you wanted to create another tool.
And so I said, for me, what I would want is something that enables me to access interesting content, which for him would be stuff about our business and about life in Canada, but where it was easy to learn the words and phrases. Because otherwise, if you're forever looking up in a dictionary, the minute we close the dictionary, we forget what we looked up. And that's no matter where you look it up, you forget it right away.
Right.
And then, or you have books with these vocabulary lists, and half the time the word that you want to know isn't on their list, and a whole bunch of words are on their list that you already know. Like, there's no way that the person who writes the book can anticipate what the reader knows and doesn't know. But if you have, with these online dictionaries and with the tremendous ability to use initially minidisc recorders and then MP3 files, I said, wow, we can apply this then. So then I said, okay, so then we turned it into a multi-language platform. So we said, okay, it's not going to be, it was initially English only, but we'll make it into a place where people around the world help each other learn languages. And now we're up to 22 languages and members all over the world.
Great.
And it's fun, and I enjoy it, and I've learned, like I'm 71, and I've learned 8 languages in the last 10 years using LingQ. So I enjoy it. Big part of my life.
What would you say to those who are a little more hater that say there's no point in learning another language?
It has to come from within. And typically, it's going to be something that relates to a specific language. Like, most people are not going to learn 15 languages. So it's a specific language. So there has to be a reason. The reason, and the best reason is either you know someone, you have a friend, you have a relative, you have, a girlfriend, boyfriend, some kind of a reason. That's the strongest motivation, rather than I need this for my job, which is not as strong a motivation.
Right.
But you can't persuade someone. You can't persuade someone to find a friend, or you can't persuade someone to get interested in a culture. I was lucky. I had this professor at McGill who was just fascinated. Like, he made French culture interesting. Something that all my teachers at school never, like, they were so bad. Like, it was just, to them it was a job, teaching the language. For us it was a job, pretending we're learning the language. But this guy made it fun. So somehow you have to find that spark. And once you've done it for one language, it's like anything. If you've discovered that something is pleasurable, you're good at it, you can do it, you want to do more of it. So in the case of Greek, because I'm going to visit Crete with my wife in October, I thought it would be fun. That's about all. Now, I started with that, but I'm finding as I get into Greek that it's a lot of fun. It's very interesting. You discover the extent to which many of those words are fundamental to words that we use. And of course, Greek civilization is a big part of Western civilization, of world civilization. Even though I gather ancient Greek is different, it's still the same writing system. So as you enter these different languages, it doesn't matter whether it's French, Greek, Chinese, Russian, you discover this world. I always use the French expression, l'appétit vient en mangeant. And the more you get into it, the more interesting it is.
You got into a guest speaker at the North American Polyglot Symposium last year, and you're coming back to Le Festival des Langues de Montréal, Montreal Language Festival this year. So what are people expecting from a Steve Kaufmann presentation?
So I'm gonna talk basically about, as I always say, like, the important, like, it's not that difficult to learn a language. You don't have to tackle the grammar up front. And I can talk about how we ease ourselves into a language by developing the ability to notice, by exposing ourselves to the language, that interaction between the different learning activities, but how to do it in a way that's easy. Because I think a lot of people are intimidated by learning a language, and I think it's actually easier than the process is easy. It simply takes time. So I'm going to share some of my experience in learning different languages. And as you know, I'm very much in favor of a lot of upfront effort in listening and reading before worrying too much about how well we speak. And I'm going to make some reference to my most recent experience with Greek, because after all, there's a language that Greek is quite unlike. Like, it's not a Latin language, it's not a Germanic language. It is it's an Indo-European language, but it's different, sufficiently different that it's a challenge. It's not as big a challenge, let's say, as Arabic would be when I go and do Arabic, but it's a challenge. And I'll share those experiences with the people. But mostly I'm looking forward to meeting people there. It's an exciting event. It's exciting to meet so many people who are interested in language. And I think it all rubs off on the participants, and people come away very motivated.
And they find a friend to learn all those new languages too. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Steve, for all your time today. And I hope to meet you at LangFest in August.
I'm looking forward. Okay, I hope to see lots of people watching this video. I want to see them in Montreal.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Have yourself a nice day.
Thank you, Leo. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching this video. Remember that you can register for the Montreal Language Festival on the website down below, and you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Have a nice day.